That's why Zeke Emanuel says to the doctors, you are taking the Hippocratic oath too seriously. Why Barack Insane Obama said to the insurance company back in 2008, he says, we cannot afford this. You should not exercise any heroics in saving people's lives. And they agreed to it. That's where we are, men and women. While we're looking at the Cowboys and wondering if the Mavericks are going to win this year, these people are planning to get rid of you. Who is this preacher talking this extreme information? Where does he get this? I've been studying this and looking at it for some time. From the inner city, inside the ghetto, I've been looking at it and saying something stinks here. Something's not right what they're doing to the African American community. Every time I look up, there's a Planned Parenthood facility opening up in our community. What is that? The abortion industry has over 80% of its clinics in the minority community. You think that's an accident? It's not. And as I stepped out to the tip of the spear, I began to see things. God began to show things to me. And I recognized that this country is under an evil spell. And Satan is having his way. Because they bludgeoned and bullied the Christian voice right out of the public square. And now we won't even speak. Perhaps there's only 2 or 3 pastors here tonight because they don't want to get involved in politics. And let me tell you, they are the ones who can save this nation. There was a Black Robe Brigade at the beginning and the founding of this nation. They were all preachers who took off their robes and said to their congregation, we must fight for our liberties. And America are rallied around its preachers. Where are the preachers? Where are the gatekeepers? Where are the men of God who are the prophetic voice of God, who will stand up and say, this is evil. This is anti-God. This is against the Constitution of the United States. Where are they? Does it appear like I'm angry? I am. I think the devil is a liar. Let me finish this and I'll go back to my extemporaneous stuff. Economic Darwinism is an attempt to impose a concept of Darwin's theory on natural selection and survival of the fittest to explain market forces. In this model, economic viability determines survival of corporation businesses and now human beings. The idea that people without education or job skills or willpower to acquire them are weakening the society and should be allowed to die is outrageous and anti-Christ. It's outrageous. This is what this crowd in Washington, D.C. is making decisions on. It is imperative that we as conservative leaders include in our public discourse dialogue that connect these two threats. Most Americans have awakened to the nonsense going on in Washington, D.C., are listening to the messages from those of us who are conservative that is primarily aimed at fiscal responsibility, tax cuts, and smaller government. I submit to you that this aspect of what's needed to bring sound economic sanity to Washington, D.C. is only half of the larger story. Although it is important, an important part of that story, it is only half of that story. It is not all of it. You see, here's the fault of the Republican Party, and I've said this to the leadership. They think I'm a little, pastor's not playing with all the cards. I told them, I said, look, your message is wrong. You are not winning the hearts and minds of Americans right now by talking about fiscally responsible, limited government. They're not hearing you. Because what they're hearing on the other side is we can give you something for nothing. and something for nothing is appealing. I heard one of the gentlemen this afternoon said that over 50% of Americans are not working and are not paying into the public trough. That means only 50% of us are paying our taxes. The others are just getting a free ride. Do you think they're going to want to give up a free ride? They're not going to want to do that. But what we need to tell them is simply this, that this nation needs to return to its founding principles. Now, when we say that, most people don't even know what the founding principles are. I'll tell you in a moment. The philosophical idea that is driving what we are witnessing in the expansion and the overreach of government, and the philosophy behind the deliberate attempt of Fabian socialists to seek to bankrupt our economy through manufactured crises should be a part and parcel of the message and the messaging that we should do. We should be messaging to the electorate that heretofore have not been paying attention. It should be an integral part of what we are telling them. But they're not doing it. Well, that's too radical. You're too radical, Broden. You're too radical. I said, we are facing a radical change, and it's going to take a radical reaction to stop it. Cloward and pivot. You heard me mention that twice tonight. Let me just stop and just say what that is. Most of you know, some of you may know what that is. Cloward and Piven were professors who wrote the concept of orchestrated or manufactured crises back in 1966 at Columbia University. They were followers of Saul Alinsky. The strategy of orchestrated or manufactured crises found its greatest rhythm or application at the beginning of this administration. How many of you remember in 2008 when he got in office, there was a crisis in banking, crises in the automotive business, crises in credit card, crises in the healthcare plan, crises in the environment, this crises after crises. I submit to you that those crises were synthetic. Manufactured crises. I like science fiction. I grew up reading a lot of science fiction, and I like Jurassic Park. In Jurassic Park, the author uses the protagonist of the mathematician, and the mathematician is the one who's raising the red flag saying, hey, look guys, if you begin to mess around with nature, it could flip on us and we could go back into a prehistoric situation. How many remember the film? In the book, it explains it a little bit more. And in it, he postulates the idea of what is called the chaos theory. The chaos theory says this: if you want to make a change of the order of things today, you create chaos in order to create a new order. In other words, in order to implement a philosophy or an idea, you must have chaos and confusion. Thus, what happened in 1929 gave the socialists an opportunity to come into the government and introduce soft tyranny, Social Security, government programs. All those government programs that came up in FDR was soft tyranny. The only reason why we as Americans allowed it to happen is because we were in a period of chaos. Rahm Emanuel says, never let a good crisis go to waste. So they manufactured a crisis. If you're going to change America, the best way to change America is in the economy. And this is the strongest economic engine the world has ever seen. And somebody's pouring sugar in its tank deliberately to wreck it. I've been watching this thing, and we're looking at $14 trillion debt. And our government has not stopped spending. Don't you find that odd?